All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you can hear the sound of my voice or see my ugly mug in your screens, that can only mean one thing. Yes, it is time once again for the worst 120 minutes in all of sports. It's time for the Too Many Guys Soccer Show. And I'm joined, as I am each and every week, pretty much by my partner in all things podcasting, Mr. Stead. How goes it this week?
Going pretty good. Hopefully we will see this goal drought that Arsenal's going through cease, considering they've gone 5 straight fixtures without scoring a goal. But also I've seen some funny memes about I'm trying to wear a t-shirt to bring up the other footballing squad that I think really needs to show some improvement as DC United. And I got some funny information. I got this bingo board about who is DC United going to sign, and it ranges from world-class player's son, who is mediocre, up to player that we sold for zero money and trying to now buy back. And then it was a 27-year-old former player who appeared in Europe, whose whose reputation makes them seem better than they actually are. So a whole bunch of different things. So hopefully we can shore that up to actually get a competitive side like we used to have.
Do we have actual names for these characters?
No. These are simply descriptions of who DC United seems to go and sign every offseason.
Okay, so it's descriptions.
I'll find it and put it in the chat.
Yeah, yes, it's descriptions. It's not actual like targets. It's not like you guys are going after Gideon Zalalem or Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. It's just DC United to sign disgraced 30-year-old striker from top club. No name attached.
From top European club, yes.
Yes.
I think one was player with Hispanic sounding name.
Yes. Well, that does seem to be a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know Philadelphia Union just traded Kasper Shabilko to, I believe, Chicago for a boatload of money, to go with the boatload of money that they got from selling Mark McKenzie and Brendan Aronson last year. So, yeah, they've got all of this money, but really nobody to put the ball in the net because you just traded away your leading goal scorer. So I'm thinking that could be an issue that bears watching out. I hope they find somebody to play that position because, unfortunately, the Philadelphia Union ain't Manchester City, and they can't go through a whole entire season without something that resembles a recognized forward or striker and hope to win the Premier League. It has been an interesting couple of weeks for Arsenal, who had gotten back into the top 4, of course, and then a rough week for Mikel Arteta. The embarrassing loss to Nottingham Forest, a not so great performance this weekend, and even midweek was a little bit.
Midweek wasn't that great either. No, they've hit a bump, but you know what? I'll say this though. I feel like this bump though hasn't been as bad as the bump usually is at this time of year for Arsenal. Arsenal is seeking to extend Arteta already, and there are grumblings that City may try to get him back. Simply, and if not necessarily in a managerial capacity, but maybe in capacity where they bring him back into the fold with the expectation that he take the reins in a few years. So I've read various rumors and grumblings about that, but it sounds like Arsenal are hearing things about the interest in Arteta from clubs that could probably give him a lot more money, not just from a salary perspective, but from a money to work with perspective, and to see how well he would be in that situation. I think it's actually wise for Arsenal to resign him. I do. I don't see a better direction right now for them to go. And we have to recall, this is a team in serious rebuild mode. And the fact that they're flirting with top 4, and by no means are they out of anything right now, as far as qualifying for Champions League is concerned. After 22 games, it's not a bad place to be right now. I think that anybody in Arsenal's position at the beginning of the season would be okay with the way things are going now.
We've got we always talk about this time of year. The mini leagues start to develop, the table has started to take shape. And while I don't believe that we have a look at what the final table is going to look like, it's clear that there are these mini leagues starting to develop. You have Manchester City out in front by 9 points, and then you have this race for second in between Chelsea and Liverpool to see, if one of them can mount a title charge. Then you've got Manchester City, West Ham, Manchester United, West Ham, Arsenal, Spurs, and to a certain extent, Wolves.
Got to put Wolves in. I think you got to put Wolves in.
Yeah, I just, they've been a little bit inconsistent, but, considering the start that they had.
They've been much better as of late, exactly.
And, Raul Jimenez being back full-time for them has really been a big boost for that team. Even if he isn't necessarily the player that he was before the head injury, it's still a major boost to have him back in front of goal, although it looks increasingly like Adama Traore is going to be heading for the door at this transfer window, which I don't think would be a bad move. I think he's accomplished everything. We know what he is going to be at Wolves. Right. And at Wolves, I don't think he's a player that necessarily fits because scoring and the crossing, the work product that you expect from a winger just has not developed in his time there. And, you've got this guy who you play because he's a 25 million pound player, but he doesn't score goals and he doesn't create assists. So he's just a really buff looking dude with semi good hair running up and down the pitch on the wings, and you got to sub him after 70 minutes to get something in. But
I think Wolves would be better served too with a player that was a bit more moldable right now. And I almost think that for someone to get more out of Traore, it would need to be a manager who has chops, but also with players who are more effective than he is. And even at what he can already do, they're more effective than he is. I think that's the only way he's going to raise his game. What's frustrating to me for him is I do see a player who should be playing better than he is, primarily from a decision-making standpoint. He makes poor decisions with the ball and lets his athleticism get the best of him. And I feel like if he were to be a bit more of a student of the game at this point in his career right now, he would maximize his talents a bit more because look, he has every physical gift that anyone could have. So I really think that he's got to see the game better to control himself better, because I mean, it's not that difficult to find a guy who can run fast that can dribble the ball over the touchline after a while.
And he's at that crucial point in his career where, it is really now or never for him. At 26 years old, you're no longer a prospect, you're not a phenom. You should be in the prime of your career. In the
These guys are 6, 7, 8 years in their career by this point.
Yeah, and so with him, I suspect that at around this time we start to see what we know what the finished article looks like by this time. Usually by 26, 27, 28 years old, we know what you are. And right now, it's yes, you are good enough to play in the Premier League, but there needs to be some continued development if you're going to stay over in England. Maybe a move to someplace like Italy might suit him, where his physical attributes would allow him to create such a menace that he would be almost unplayable. But we've seen he's a massively physically gifted dude, but the soccer talent just hasn't been there for him. Moving on, Brighton, who I think, although they've regressed a little bit, I think have really overperformed. But with 30 points after 22 games, I don't think they're necessary. It's not a bad, but then this is where you get into the fight for the midfield, the fight for the mid-table. That's Brighton. Leicester, who I'm a little bit surprised are down there.
They've been a little snake bitten, man. They've had some bad luck. They just had some really bad luck.
But that's what happens, and I think again,
it does. It happens.
after a couple of years of really punching above their weight class, I think they've regressed kind of to the mean. We saw this happen a little bit after their title winning season.
I think they finished 8th the following year. Yeah.
Yeah, I have my suspicions that Brendan Rodgers has done what he can do at that club with what he's got to work with and what he's going to be able to produce. And I'm never one who's going to sit here and say, like, I don't normally advocate for people to lose their jobs. But after, I think 3-4 years of Brendan Rodgers, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, I don't know if you can get much more out of this club. I know they've been snake bitten. I know that they've been the injury bug, but then there's also the fact, like, we're still very reliant on Jamie Vardy to score goals for us.
And that was going to be my point.
We're still haven't necessarily found replacements for some key pieces like we should have at some point in time. You know, maybe the idea of moving along Wilfred Ndidi or a Yuri Tielemans or something like that, who I rate them both as great midfielders. They might have missed the trick on when to sell James Maddison at his highest value to get something back for him.
Especially before he started getting injured,
Yeah, I think some of the bloom has come off of that rose. There's not enough there right now to sustain it. I think, you know, and I understand Brendan Rodgers is going to get a lot of stick for this season. You know, they're sitting after 20 games on 26 points. This is not where they're used to being.
Right.
And, you know, you're competing for 10th, 11th place, but then Aston Villa, Southampton, Crystal Palace, and Brentford. I mean, all of these teams are within 7 points of 9th place.
And look at the recent showings of Crystal Palace and Aston Villa, who have been very competitive lately. And you know, you're bringing up very good points about Leicester, because what really worries me too is, like, what are they going to do post Vardy? What are they going to do?
It has been a very stable team, and we've talked about this around this with Sean.
When you got a guy that's putting in 15 to 20 goals every year, and then all of a sudden he's 39, 38, 37 and retires. Ooh, that's a big hole to fill.
And yes, what I was going to say, though, was I was looking more like the financial stability of it. And Leicester's a team now that has established itself. It would be a surprise after almost a decade in the Premier League to see them go down. A team that won it, you know, 8 years ago. So I don't think after Vardy goes to
an FA Cup. I mean, they won an FA Cup too. They've won two. They won 2 trophies at a Leicester club of all that. I mean, dang, that's great.
They've been to the knockout stages of multiple European competitions.
Yes,
over the years.
and they won a knockout round. They got to the quarters that year after they won the championship. So, dude, this team's had a remarkable run. I
was going to compare them to the team that's sitting just above them in Brighton, because we've talked about the coach and or the manager and the team and the young players that they have, and kind of following that. And we've said, you know, well, what if he moves to a team like Manchester United or a team like Everton? And would that be a upward move for somebody? Because after talking to Sean, you know, when he points out the fact, like, this is a team that has a certain amount of financial stability. They're set up to remain in the Premier League. They're going to grow organically. They're not going to overspend. You know, there's a lot of positives to being at Brighton right now. And I know that Chelsea Mike will hate me for saying that, because he just believes, like, they think their perfect record, as he likes to say it, is 0-38-0. And if Graham Potter could tie every game with 38 points, he'd be happy. And, you know, he's right. This is a team that since it's been up, has fought against relegation, but now they find themselves in 8th. Yes, they've taken a dip in form, but I think Graham Potter's done about as good a job as he can. But the question is, and going back to what we were talking about with the table, like where are the midfield teams right now? We used to have this cursus honorum where you would start at a bottom team like a Sunderland or somebody, and then work your way up to an Everton or a Newcastle or an Aston Villa or a Leicester now, and then you would be trained to take one of the top jobs at like Spurs or something like that. But there's no more midfield. There's no more mid-table teams, or either that or they've changed so radically that I'm looking and saying like, okay, I guess the mid-table teams, the midfield, if you will, is Wolves or Brighton.
You're looking at that team that you're going, okay, look, these are the teams that aren't going to be top four, but they're not going to get relegated either. And now you're going, well, I guess for a while it was Leicester, but Leicester was hitting top four, so they couldn't really fall in that category. So yeah, I think since they've been promoted, I guess you got to go with the Wolves. Maybe Southampton. I don't know, but Southampton always seems like they're a couple games away from getting in the bottom three. So I don't know.
Southampton just always seems to me like a team that's either a couple of games away from ending up in the bottom three or a couple of games away from ending up in Europe. So I guess that is the definition of a mid-table side. Like, we'll hopefully get Professor Matt and British Will on to talk a little bit more about the situation at Leicester, because again, now I'm looking at the bottom of the table. Everton. You've got Everton, Norwich, Newcastle, Watford, and Burnley. Burnley's played the fewest games of anybody in the league. They just played their first game in like all season this week.
Yeah.
They're on 12 points. Meanwhile, there are 7 points that separate Everton in 16th from Burnley in 20th, but Everton's also got 2 games in hand. And let's be honest, Everton have looked awful. And then Watford firing Claudio Ranieri today. I gotta believe that is just about it for the Tinkerman. I can't.
But like, how often is Watford going to blame the coach for the fact that they can't win games? I mean, I'm sorry, there's something else going on at Watford, but they seem to do this quite often.
Well, when you can't fire all the players, you fire the manager. I mean, we've seen that.
Are they still starting Troy Deeney? I don't know. They might be. And I got nothing but respect for Troy Deeney. I have nothing but respect. I love the guy.
I love him to death, and I think that Watford has always been that team that's in that Norwich realm that likes to get up there and stick and stay. I just think that my guess is that Watford management felt like when they got Claudio Ranieri, they expected a little bit better results from him. Like you would be able to. We're not expecting you to take the team that we've got and get them into the top 4, and we're probably not even expecting you to take the team that we've got and get them into Europe. What we are expecting you to be able to do, based on your reputation, is keep them out of the relegation zone. Right? No. Do they have the team that he had at Leicester when he won the Premier League title? No. We know this.
No.
But
there's some talent there. There's some talent there.
Our hope would be that, we would do a little bit better than 14 points, right? And so I can understand.
Yeah, if you just look at it solely from points, absolutely. I mean, you expect them to, 14 points is not a good clip. No, not a good clip.
I would expect them to. I understand completely their desire, and we are at that. And right now is the perfect time to make a managerial change. We're coming into an international break. You've got 2 weeks to work with players, your core players, a lot of players. Some of these players will not be called up for national teams. I know that it's an awkward time of year, but it at least gives you a chance to get in, get the office furniture moved around. If you're what's his name from the Apple show? Ted Lasso. You can hang the sign up.
No, yeah. Oh, Believe.
You can hang the folded Believe sign up on there. You know what? Funny though, I will admit this. I love this conversation about the thing that we were talking, the table and how it's developed in the little leagues that are developing the Premier Leagues, and I do enjoy it. I think that you have to, at a certain point, look at the little mini leagues, and we'll talk with Brian Robb about them in the Bundesliga when we get around to him. But ostensibly, we were supposed to start off this show talking about American football because this week was probably one of the best weeks of American football that I can remember in a long time. Last Monday we were both sitting here doing the show, watching the national championship game, and I will admit that it stunk until it didn't.
Yeah.
And when it got good, it got real good.
Yeah.
And congratulations to George. And then this weekend's playoff games.
Yeah. Well, I also say this.
Nuts.
That was nuts. But last weekend's playoff games were not very good. they were not very good. I was like, okay, this is boring. This is flat out boring. It was boring, or the only game that seemed to have any drama was a game where, I'm sorry, the Cowboys had 16 penalties. Mm-hmm. Now, and they were still in the game. That's the funny thing. And the fact that the team that beat them won this weekend is even crazier. It's even crazier. Look, the Cowboys, if they had 10 penalties, would have won that game. If they just kept it to 10, they would have won that game. But no, they had to bring
it was a pretty bad weekend for games, for NFL games last week. But remember,
this weekend was way better.
This week,
way better.
We're only going Monday. I cut you off. You only got Monday to Monday, so you got the national championship game, which was great. Like I said, I know it was 9-6 or at halftime, and that it was pretty boring until midway through the third quarter. But when it got good, it got really, really good. Mm-hmm. And then this 3 last-second field goals to win game. 3 last-second field goals to win games in an overtime game.
And 1 last-second field goal to send it to overtime. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So every game involved, and then how do you compare 25 points scored in the last 2 minutes?
That was bonkers. That was amazing, especially considering what was great about that game as comparison to the game before was that game you saw 2 teams that were battling and just like we have to throw something. We got to try. Versus the previous game where you saw a team that did everything they could to give the game to the opposing team. I'm sorry, the Rams kept giving Tammy the ball. Hey, I got an idea. Let's repeatedly turn the ball over to the one player where we've all seen this movie before. Let's keep giving the ball back to Tom Brady. Yeah, that's a good idea. What do you think? They are so lucky that they won that game because they tried so hard to give it away. Versus the second game where you saw both teams just throwing haymakers to try to see if they can stay up. So, I mean, what a weekend.
It was funny. I was talking to somebody and I was like, Tom Brady said when he was down 27-3, I've been down 28-3 and came back and won. I was like, somehow this 27-3 doesn't feel the same. Like if you're going into the latter half of the third quarter, the fourth quarter, and it's 27-6, 27-3, and you haven't managed to do anything in that rush and Aaron Donald is getting home. And then all of a sudden the Rams tried to do everything that they could. And it was big for, how we were talking about managers and coaches with Sean McVay or with Claudio Ranieri. I think this is a big one for Sean McVay, who got his team was like the darling of NFL coaches for a while, the super young guy for a while. All you needed to do to get a job as an NFL coach was have stood in an elevator at some point with Sean McVay and they would hire you. It was like,
absolutely.
We think, this guy's like Sean McVay. Everybody wanted the next Sean McVay. And let's be honest, it's been downhill for them since that Super Bowl where, the vaunted offensive guru became the first coach to coach a team whose offense didn't score, or who didn't score an offensive touchdown the whole entire game. So I think he needed this as much as anybody else. So he's in there. So we've got a good old fashioned NFC West battle between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And then
but San Francisco game too. Sorry. That was dull. I actually fell asleep during that game because it was an 8:20 game on a Saturday. And I woke up as they were kicking the field goal to win, and I thought that I had just dozed off because I was like, oh, okay, it's 10-13. I didn't realize that that was the final score of the game, and the fact that Aaron Rodgers, who marched down the field, opening drive, scores a touchdown, couldn't put any more points on the board for the rest of the game. It's like, wow, okay, it's not, but that's it. But that seems to be Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's always been outside of the 1 year where he took the 6th-rated team and won the Super Bowl with them. It's kind of been a letdown, and there's only but so many times he can sit there and say, "Oh, if you put more around me, we'll win." We've given you what we've got to give you.
Yeah, that team is set. Okay, y'all just laid an egg. And San Francisco does have a good defense, but they have no offense. Their offense is named Deebo Samuel. And next thing when you have your wide receiver running the ball and you catching the ball and throwing the ball, it's like.
Have you seen the video of the San Francisco 49ers walk out from the locker room to the field?
No.
Oh, you've got to look this up. It includes the biggest faux boombox that I've ever seen. Like, the strength and conditioning coach is carrying what is a glorified MP3 player that's set up to look like an old school boombox, but it is also the size of a bookshelf. Blasting Kodiak Black's Super Gremlin. And you can tell the different ages because like Jimmy G is just walking dead. He's got his helmet on and he's walking. And then you've got Deebo Samuels and Trent Williams up front, and they are getting in. Like, it's worth it.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
You've got to look up a video of this.
All right, I'll look it up. Absolutely.
Classic. It is great.
And the Rams got to be shaken because I think the one team that didn't want to play was San Francisco.
They've already played them and beat them. Yeah, they've already played them twice.
Yeah, but San Francisco beat them twice. Last time they played. Yeah. So I'm like, they want to play them. Yeah, they want to play them. They're like, give us the Packers. Give us the Packers.
And then I can't say that I saw the Bengals coming. Like, it just comes down to Joe Burrow, and he has taken that Joe Cool nickname to heart. Yeah. I don't know what you can do with them. They've won with offense, they've won with defense, but that is so. One more thing we've got to talk about before we get on to Mr. Rob and talking a little Bundesliga and some U.S. men's national team. Did you see the new shirt that Bohemians, the Irish team Bohemians FC dropped? Yet another, and I don't, let me not complain. Like, I'm all for Bob Marley soccer related gear, right? And let me also say, this is it's an away kit. The proceeds go to charities to develop musical programs and stuff. It commemorates his last public concert, which was in Ireland before he passed. It's a great jersey. It's got the red, yellow, and green stripe down the side, and then a really nice picture of Bob being Bob. I think it has done wonders for attracting attention to Bohemians, because I know at least three of us who are on this show immediately went and ordered it the minute that we found out about it, because I know I've got one. Lowe said that he was in. If I've got a jersey, I know Rob has got to have ordered it already.
I think G put one in too.
G might probably put one in, so that's 4.
But if G ordered it, it won't get here for 3 months.
Well, G missed the trick. It's not his fault that he missed the trick on the Ajax kit, and it's actually funny because if you look at his versus Rob and mine, Rob and I got ours during the pre-sale, so we got ours like when they first came out. There's some additional sponsors and badges on the one that G got, so it's slightly different than the version that I have.
It sounded to me like you were making a point, though. You're about to make a point, and I'm curious to hear what your point is.
No, I'm loving the Bob Marley inspired kits. I think it's great. Take a look at it. I question where is this going to become a thing? Hey, we have some tangential connection to a famous musician. Let's put out a can we put out a Rolling Stones inspired kit? Because Charlie Watts once walked down the street outside of the
Look,
ground.
I won't get one until I see a Wu-Tang Clan one. Then I might be in. I don't know. I saw it, and I won't lie. I had a similar reaction. I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, and mainly because I feel like, I understand the connection they chose to make with Bob Marley, but what bothers me is too many people think Jamaica is only Bob Marley, and there's so much more to that culture and that music. And you talk to people about music out of Jamaica, and the only thing they know is Bob Marley, and that is extraordinarily frustrating for a place that is as rich in musical history and heritage, and how much they've affected music throughout the Western world, which has been, you look at some of the, I was a big drum and bass head when I was younger. I actually still am. Drum and bass is solely based on reggae music and dance hall from the 70s and 80s that had turned into breakbeat, which turned into drum and bass. Like all that is all rooted in Jamaica. And I just wish that whenever there was something that was involved with that particular island, it was that more clubs, let's go with this club. I'm not saying every club has done this, I don't know, but that there would just be more that was done outside of Bob Marley. That's just like, I'm like, oh God, another, I listen, I have a bunch of Bob Marley stuff, like music records and stuff like that. And I don't listen to them anymore because it's got overplayed. I just had enough. And there's so much out there. So, go ahead, Bohemian FC. If that was the connection you had, that's the connection you chose to make. Great.
The only reason why
when I see a Wu-Tang inspired team, a Wu-Tang inspired jersey, maybe look, they toured in Japan. I'll get me a Yokohama FC jersey if it's got a big old Wu on it. Yeah, see, I'll get that. Then I'll get one of those. Until then, I ain't get one.
I think I would do that one. I do give, but one of the reasons why is like Bohemians is 100% fan owned. So
that's cool.
It's
very
not,
cool.
it kind of fits in. I think they have more claim and I'm more with them doing it. And I wish Bohemians had gotten theirs out before Ajax got theirs out. Because I bet you if Bohemians had gotten that one out first, that would be the only one that I would have this year, because I would have looked at it and said, you know what, Ajax, the Three Birds, I understand that you sing it in the stadium. It's kind of like, at least they have a claim. They're donating proceeds to buy musical instruments and fun programming. It's a good story. Like, I'm with that. Otherwise, it's, we're going to do a Wu-Tang inspired jersey because Method Man once smoked pot in the lobby of our hotel where we stayed at one game during a preseason tour.
It's happening.
Yeah,
it's happening. As long as it has to be Method Man in full on meth mode, blunts in the headband, then I'll be good with it.
One of these
you know what I'm talking about, Rob. You remember that video?
One of these years after when we're not on the air because of legal issues, I will tell you the story of the evening that I encountered Method Man and Redman up in New York.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's we'll do that at Brickside.
yeah. We can't do that on the air. I know that I am the host of a lowly rated soccer podcast, but I'd like to keep being the host of a lowly rated soccer podcast. All right, so let's turn our attention and welcome in our good friend Byron Robb, resplendent in his U.S. Centennial kit, ready to talk a little bit of Bundesliga and then preview the upcoming round of fixtures for the U.S. men's national team. By the way, Stead, I've got you. I know the Six Nations starts, but we have another show before Six Nations starts. So we'll preview Six Nations with Cam next week because Cam can't be on this week. But I'm going to give Cam additional time to come on so that we can discuss a little bit of Six Nations rugby.
I was watching rugby sevens this weekend already. I saw a great women's game between the United States and Russia too. So yeah, bring it on.
So Rob, how goes it this evening?
Fantastic.
Instead, we should have a Run DMC inspired kit.
I don't know why the city have not done like an Oasis theme shirt somehow, like something Oasis.
I would literally buy that just to burn it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with you, and I would bathe it in oil and burn it. But yeah, the synergy between like famous artists, musical artists, and clubs, especially in England, like Elton John probably has a favorite club, like
John's heavily involved with Watford.
yeah, exactly. So like why isn't there like a Elton John theme, like Rocket Man, like like
You've got to talk to Watford about that one.
they got too many, they got problems. They got to find a new manager first.
So it was a weekend, another weekend in the Bundesliga. I watched some of the goals. Borussia Dortmund had a couple of beauties from Marco Reus and Erling Haaland. Their defense is still a work in progress. Bayern did Bayern things again, and they are starting to do. So Stead and I at the top of the show talked about how in the Premier League we've started to have these little mini leagues, and I get the feeling very much so a similar thing has developed in the Bundesliga, where you've got Bayern, who are going to be the presumptive champions, pretty much by February. But then the competition for spots develops around, you have a couple, 3, 4, 5 teams fighting for the next couple of spots down throughout the table.
Yeah, pretty much. Like it's a 2-club race at this year. It's going to be Bayern and Dortmund again, and after that, between third and 8, it's 6 points. It's a lot of shuffling there between their traditional powers of like Frankfurt, for example, and a Leverkusen, and versus some of the up and coming ones. You got the Union Berlin's there. Hoffenheim has made Champions League at one point, but they're really not a Champions League squad. Even Köln's there and Freiburg. So they're all jostling for position, and it seems like every week there's a major reshuffling. At one point we thought Leverkusen was gonna be among the mix, but now they're leading the pack in the third spot. I mean, they have the talent for it. So it looks like they will hold steady at third, but at least they'll get a Champions League spot. But after that, it's a lot of shuffling between the Union Berlin, for example, and even a Leipzig. Starting to roar back. We thought they were down and out when Jesse Marsch got fired, and they hired Dominic Tedesco, who formerly managed Schalke. And then he took a little detour over in Russia, and he came back and he steadied the ship a little bit. He's really done some wonders there, and it might be a combination of his steady hand, maybe not trying to do too much. Some of the players started to get adjusted to the style of Leipzig, like Andre Silva, and maybe like they got more comfortable in tactics, and they're starting to really be who we thought they would be, which is a Champions League contending squad. We thought actually they would probably really compete with Bayern for the title, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But they've been roaring back. They won their last 3 league matches by 2 or more goals. And they had this kid who's a center back from Croatia, Josko Gavordiola. Dola. He comes from Dynamo Zagreb.
Guardiola. Yes, yeah. He was the starting left back on their the Croatian national team this summer.
Yeah, and he's already had 9 caps for the Croatian squad, and he's been just a revelation at Leipzig. I play a lot of fantasy Bundesliga, and he has just been on a tear. He got his first 2 assists this past weekend. He has a 2.1 xG, as a center back in the back 3, which is kind of remarkable. So, I think him and Silva and Nkoku are the ones really saving the season for Leipzig, and that's why they're back in the hunt.
Talk about what's going on. I was just pulling up the various tables, and I was looking at the second division, the Bundesliga 2. St. Pauli, who of course we remember because number one, they had a big win in the Georgia the Pokal over the course of the last couple of weeks. But, the podcast Darling Schalke, Matt and G's team in the mix up at the top. But there's some teams that I remember from the Bundesliga who are in that division, maybe not scattered throughout. So as you're looking at the second division roster, I know I kind of sprung this one on you. It was an accident that I pulled it up in the first place. But any teams that we should be looking out for that you would expect to make it? I'm looking at Werder Bremen, who has been on what looks like a almighty tear, picking up 5 wins in their last 5 games. Whereas St. Pauli's kind of tailed off, only 1 win in their last 5. So if you're handicapping that to see who gets a chance to move up into the Bundesliga, anybody who stands out to you?
So I think, so just to pivot back real quick to the first division, whoever is in that relegation spot has to be very, very careful, because on the other side, coming up from the second division, could be a perennial Bundesliga squad with resources. I know Schalke has some money issues, but it could be Schalke or Bremen. And, those are not easy. They're not easy teams to play, so if you get a Hertha, for example, or even let's just say by the chaos would happen, which a Gladbach slide back, they're going to have to play a team that normally plays Bundesliga quality games. And there's a real danger that, somebody, a big powerhouse like a Hertha or a Gladbach could drop, because I think Bremen and Schalke do have the talent. They have the experience to make a move into the playoff spot and do some damage. Now, Darmstadt is, they have moved up and down. They're actually currently leading the second division, and they are a team that has Bundesliga experience, but they yo-yo between the divisions. The St. Pauli one is it's a weird place, because they had such a good beginning of the season, and they had this massive win in the cup versus Dortmund, and then to lose the following weekend definitely hurt their chances. They're one of the teams that you actually can see them fall back all the way to 4th, and it would be a shame, because I think they're a fun club to be around. They're a fun club to have in the top division. They're very fan oriented. They love they're a bunch of rebels, the rock and roll and the pirate theme and all that. But they just don't have the squad, a Bremen or a Schalke or even a Hamburg have. So it's going to be, there's a lot of movement there. There's I think I'm looking at the table right now. So Nuremberg is at 7th at 33, and then St. Pauli is at 37 in second. So those 4 points separate all those spots. So once again, this is the race here that you want to look out for, and you're not going to see really any solidification until for another couple months, because I think they're all just going to play each other, beat each other, or get draws, and then it's going to just be a 1 point or 2 point difference going into May.
So let's pivot and talk a little bit about the U.S. men's national team, who will be playing 3 matches over this next window. We have home matches against El Salvador and Honduras, sandwiching around a super important away match against Canada on Sunday at 3. The U.S. currently sits second in the CONCACAF qualifying tournament, 4 wins and as opposed to only 4 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. Rob, give us an overall picture of what do you think? How do you feel going into the new year and the final 6 games or so? The final 6 games of this CONCACAF qualifying tournament for U.S. men.
So the last window is it's going to be one of the hardest ones, because it has road matches in versus Mexico and Costa Rica, two of the traditional best teams in the region. So it's very, very important that the U.S. comes out with 6, preferably 7 points out of this window. But it's going to be frigid temperatures. El Salvador and Columbus, Ohio will be 27 degrees at game time. In Canada, which will be hosted in Hamilton, Ontario, at the Tim Hortons Field, which hopefully will have some nice hot coffee from Tim Hortons themselves. It's going to be 22 degrees at game time. And in Minnesota, why they're playing in Minnesota in an open air stadium in February, early February, is beyond me. But it's going to be 33 degrees on game time with snow earlier in the morning. They're more used to these conditions than their competition, except for Canada, of course. So they really need 2 wins out of this window, and they need to at least draw Canada, because you want to give yourself the best position possible before you head to Mexico and before you head to Costa Rica for the last game of the qualifiers. And it's imperative that they really develop an aggressive game, especially with El Salvador, Honduras. We remember the first window where it was just fireworks and chaos, and all the fans were screaming and hollering, and you have players like Serginho Dest who look like they've never seen such chaos before. They need to be aggressive starting out versus their traditional Central American teams, and really hold the ball and really take it to them, because you play defensive against them, you're giving them life. The U.S. is the U.S. They have the talent. They have been preaching, our best kids are playing in the best leagues. Now you have to show it together, and this is the time to do it. You got to get 6 points here.
All right, Stead, how hopeful are you that we can follow through with what Byron Rob said and get the 6 points that we need? We are playing at home. We are hosting in Columbus and Minnesota, the 2 teams that are right now currently rock bottom of the qualifying table. And we have a lot of our players playing at or near their peak form. Of course, Matt Turner, who we presume would probably go in as number 1, hasn't played since the end of the MLS season. But guys like Brendan Aronson, his form may have dipped a little bit for the club, but he's getting quality minutes. Christian Pulisic, we know, has had an up and down run at Chelsea, but still getting quality minutes. Weston McKennie back on the side. Yunus Musa had a goal this week. Tim Weah finally looks like he's developing into the player that we thought that he was. How
I think, maybe not, this probably doesn't pertain to this round so much, but seeing it appears that DeAndre Yedlin's been released by Galatasaray and is going to come back to the MLS, but I think that's actually good for him at this stage in his career. He's had a really good run in Europe, and I think he would bring a lot to conclude his career in MLS. I'm hopeful, but I'm hopeful for a different reason too, though. I like the fact that Josh Sargent didn't get called up.
No, I didn't think he deserved it.
Of course he doesn't deserve it. But for too long, we've seen players that simply because they play in Europe or they play in the Premier League or the Bundesliga or like the Eredivisie or somewhere, and especially if they're playing in England, they just get called up. And the fact that the United States could look at Josh Sargent and say, no, you've received several quality minutes playing for Norwich, and you did not score until this weekend after the calls were already done. You got your first 2 goals, and the first goal, come on, that wasn't all that impressive. You got lucky, but a goal's a goal. And yeah, I'm glad he played well. I'm glad he finally, I'm glad he got on the board, but it's like, you're not a winger. You're an attacking player who's supposed to be putting the ball in the net, and you have regressed in that for for the past several years. Yes, you're still young, but we've talked about this before. But that gave me actual hope for the United States national team. It's like I think the fact that they no longer need to grasp at that play in Europe straw just to get someone to field a team that looks more competitive. I think that's actually quite positive, very positive. So my hope is that that translates to these players. It's like, we're in a different era here. We're not in the era of you play in Europe, boom, you're in on the national team. You're starting for a club over in Europe, boom, you're on the national team. It's much healthier, I think, this way, to get a team that's also going to have probably more buy-in with the coach and just be a little bit more know that, no place is secure. I think that's quite important. So, I mean, I think I took a different route to get there, and I wasn't trying to pick on Josh Sargent, but I was trying to show that I feel like the quality in the team has improved because they can make these decisions now that they couldn't make before. Hopefully that will translate to more success in the field, because as we've seen, I mean, Canada's a lot better than they used to be. And so it's not a US, Mexico, and then everybody else, and to see who can knock off one of the two, which is usually the United States.
Well, it is going to be interesting to see, though, because Canada will be without Alphonso Davies, who is currently suffering from myocarditis after bout COVID. We have seen that Canada is a different bird, a different beast entirely, when they have Alphonso Davies in the lineup and playing his preferred winger position, as opposed to when they do not, right? We can look back at how they played in a Nations League match last year, when they played him at defender instead of winger, which is where he played. Yes, I know he plays defender for Bayern, but he's primarily a winger, and they chose to play him at left back, where he had a minimal impact on the game, and the US won. Since then, it was 1-0 in the Gold Cup, and then the draw earlier at home in World Cup qualifying. But we are going to be going up there. Rob, I wanted to ask you about some decisions. We talked. Stead mentioned that Greg Berhalter left out Josh Sargent. Not only is that testament to we don't need to bring people in as just because we need to bring them in. For so long, attacker has been the bane of our existence. Just finding anybody who can put the ball into the net, and all of a sudden, with the likes of a Tim Weah, a Ricardo Pepi, we start to have just options at that position, where so you can leave a Josh Sargent, who's not really scoring for Norwich right now, at home. We also saw John Brooks being left out. The former captain. I think that was a big move. I'm still wondering what Cameron Carter-Vickers needs to do to get himself back into the good graces of the U.S. men's national team. It's not like he's 30 years old applying his trade. He's still a young player who's having a really good season with Celtic. What does he need to do to get himself back on this roster?
I think I would have chosen him over Mark McKenzie, because I think Cameron Carter-Vickers has actually played. He's playing. He's actually playing well. The Celtics folks love him. And Mark McKenzie's been over in the Belgium league, right? But this is one of those instances where Greg Berhalter is choosing players that he's familiar with. I mean, I think at this point of the cycle, he's like, I don't need to reevaluate new people. I need to evaluate the people that I know already.
He brought in Jordan Morris.
Yeah, but at least with Jordan Morris has national, more national team experience and success with the national team. So he is an entity, and also he did get called. He wasn't called up formally in the last window, which was kind of a weird December window, but he was there kind of doing training and getting familiar with the squad and all that. So in that case, he's sort of familiar more recently. But yeah, this is why Sebastian Lletget keep getting called up. Greg
and Giassi
Zardes, right? And it's funny,
Coach Matt to talk about that one.
so Giassi Zardes, for example, I'm looking at the forwards, and like he plays a 9, and I don't know if he's going to touch the field because you're going to start Ricardo Pepi, and probably right behind him will be Jesus Ferreira, and then maybe behind him, is like a Zardes, maybe. Or you could also play Jordan Morris there because Jordan Morris right now is playing on the wings for Seattle, but on the left wing specifically. But you have Christian Pulisic there, you have Brendan Aronson there. So like, do you really want to play him on the wing? Like, there's no room for Jordan Morris to play in a wing, and there's no room to play Jordan Morris really in the 9 position, along with Jesse Zardes. So there's a lot of mismatched lineups here. There's a lot of players on this call up. I think it's a 28. But also the one interesting thing too is real quick. So for the Chelsea folks, Christian Pulisic did not play this weekend, and Greg Berhalter had said that he's looking to him to play all 3 matches. I don't know if he'll go the full 90 all 3, but he's going to play all 3. He wants a full midfield playing the full all 3 matches, which is McKennie, Musa, and Adams as well. So he's counting on those players, those young players in the frigid temperatures of the north to really put their stamp on their ticket to Qatar. And it'll be fun. I'm excited for this lineup. I'm a little bit worried about Serginho Dest because I think he's a little bit overrated lately. We've heard rumblings with him in Barca, and how he's now welcome there, even though he started a full 90, I believe, which is kind of interesting there. But last time he played against El Salvador, he was getting turned by El Salvador. So in Honduras. So I'm confused on there, but he probably will start, because like they want to attack, then you need him up there to attack. So, just one more note here. So the U.S. have brought in 4 keepers.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th keeper is a 17-year-old from Chicago Fire named Gabriel Solina. And some people in the circles have considered it a little bit more of an FU to David Ochoa, who used to play for the U.S. national team or on the youth squads, but then he chose Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who did not get called up by Mexico this window?
David
Ochoa. So F you, David Ochoa, for choosing Mexico, and served you right. You sit at home.
All right, Bob. Well, we want to thank you for coming on. Great to have you as always. We'll get you back next week to recap what's going on with the U.S. men's national team, as we should by Monday have a little bit better idea.
And I hope to be in Canada for the match. I hope to. I'll let you know if I make it, but I hope to get there.
All right. Well, have fun. You can have all that. We are going to switch gears again and welcome in the Merseyside contingent. Stead, it was bad enough when there's one of them. Now there's 2 of them. I'm not ready.
I said I got a 3rd on the way too. So
geez, no. We have
Instead, you have another child coming.
No, we have a strict 2 Scouser limit on the show. All right, we have how there's a 2 drink minimum. There's a 2 Scouts maximum on the Too Many Guys Soccer Show. We want to welcome in British Will and our good friend, the Professor Matt Kowalski. We're going to talk about the happenings on Merseyside. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit of African Cup of Nations. Instead of, unfortunately, I don't know, this tournament just has been it's been a kind of a slow burn. We had our first of the round of 16 matches. Comoros lost to Cameroon, the hosts, 2-1, despite getting a red card early in the first half and having to start a left back in goal because all of their goalkeepers were either injured or out with COVID. And the game itself, though, was unfortunately marred by a crushing incident outside of the stadium that left a reported 6 people dead. There were scenes of about 70,000 people trying to get into a 50,000 seat arena that was capped at 80%. And just so, again, horrible scenes there. We saw Nigeria get bumped earlier. They went out at the first hurdle in the round of 16. Algeria is out. So the goals have continued to not go in. I find it hard to think of an African Cup of Nations where you have more 1-goal games than you do multiple goal games. I at least expected to see some scoring. That hasn't necessarily happened. So where do we begin with this tournament, dude?
Well, I mean, you have to wonder, though, if a little bit of there's some fatigue there. Mm-hmm. I mean, all these guys play club ball. All these guys play in Europe. They've already been playing most of the season. And it wasn't like they had a nice gap between the end of their club commitments to the start of the AFCON. They just jumped right in and started playing games. And we saw on the flip side what happened with Thomas Partey, where he comes back, where basically he leaves the field and goes directly to a plane, lands, and then plays in a game for Arsenal, and then gets a red card, which is probably because he was exhausted. So, I think that's a part of it. I think that's a part of it for of course, the bigger teams, and why you would see an Algeria and Nigeria already be out of the tournament. And also why you were seeing a club like Cameroon, who do have a player who scored 6 or 7 goals in this African Cup of Nations, barely win against a 10-man Comoros side. So yeah, I think that's a part of it, which is probably goes to what I think some people, the debates about should they have this tournament in the winter versus the summer. I've been disappointed. I think I was, I know last week I was very high on it, but I was also feeling good about being able to see African soccer when I wanted to. And I may have overshot my excitement for what the games are. Let's get to the quarterfinals and see what comes of that. I think it has been disappointing. It has, and AFCON did not get off to a great start. But any coverage is good coverage. The tournament is being covered. The tournament is being discussed. The tournament is getting exposure. Hopefully they can end it on a positive note as far as getting some exciting football out for the quarterfinals and on, and give outlets really an inclination to talk about what's happening on the field as opposed to what's happening off the field. So that's my hope. Is it going to happen? I don't know. And you did make a good point last week of like being the third international tournament isn't necessarily a bad thing, and they're never going to get better than third. But you would just hope that third place is still a real quality product.
Yeah, they haven't looked that much more exciting than the Gold Cup this summer. So that's a bit problematic. Matt, I know you've been following it closely. Give us your thoughts on where we stand right now with the African Cup of Nations.
I don't really have that much to add. What Armstead already said. I think the general fatigue, particularly with the bigger players, definitely is playing a part here. Lack of goals is disappointing. It's been not the greatest of tournaments in that regard. One thing I will say is, and maybe again, the fatigue with some of the bigger players and some of the bigger squads has played into this. This has been the tournament of upsets. And, Nigeria's out, Algeria's out. God, although I didn't have that much hope for them going into it, are out. I mean, this is great for me and Will. I think Egypt's going home tomorrow. I don't really fancy them against Ivory Coast. And a team that I don't think any of us really thought is probably going to wind up in the final. Maybe a Mali, Cameroon's a host nation, so maybe you sort of saw them coming, or Tunisia. And Tunisia is playing well by playing essentially Jose Mourinho ball. That's their identity, and it's working for them. So,
and I brought up earlier, I think maybe the show before you came on, Matt, that the punditry on Mali was actually pretty high because of that midfield that they have. So there is
Yeah.
some talent there. And while I do think it would be a surprise, but there's some underlying talent there. You could see a lot of other Malian players probably get a bump if they were to be able to final, which would be a good thing.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. They were my dark horse coming in, so there's talent there.
Still got to look at Senegal. That I know that they have not fired at all this tournament, but still, like, the overall strength. And as you talk about teams like Tunisia and well, as we talk about teams like Ghana, the traditional powers, Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, all either gone home or potentially going home, it gives them more and more chance. I have made no secret of my love for Aliou Cisse, my desire to see him get a much-deserved trophy and bring it home to Senegal to just solidify what has been the most successful era recently for Senegalese football, and certainly his own bona fides. I will give a big shout out to Ken and Brittany and Wingy and Tukes and Dave and the rest of my Malawian crew as they go up against Morocco. The fact that Malawi even made it out into the knockout stages for them is quite is a positive. You said it's a tournament of upsets. You've got these teams like Comoros and Gambia and Malawi and these sides who are basically now playing with house money because very few people expected them to get to the tournament. Now that they've gotten to the tournament, we didn't expect them to get out of the group stages. And hey, somebody in here is going to make it into the quarters and potentially the semis. And maybe, like you said, Matt, we could have a random finalist and even more so a random champion, which I think would be, maybe this is one of those ones where we need to wait until we get to the latter stages. It starts off as a slow burn, but because we have all of these upsets, all the sudden, by the time we turn around and we're looking at the semifinals, we've got 4 teams or 3 teams in Cameroon that we didn't see coming. Because, right now, Cameroon's going to have a massive home field advantage as long as they're playing. They're the only team that can play with above 60%.
And the leading goal scorer of the tournament in Abu Bakar, which helps.
Yes. So, Will, I don't know if you've been able to follow much of the African Cup of Nations out there in the great state of Hawaii, but if you have any thoughts, what are your thinking on this?
Well, I think it's been a pretty interesting tournament. Just about every game, set of games has had a red card, which, I mean, that's, some ways you don't like to see it, some ways you do. In that sense, the games have been interesting. In the sense the goals going in, they've not been as interesting, but the play on the field doesn't always represent the number of goals that go in. That being said, I think it's sort of a taste of what's to come this winter. Because there's not going to be that big of a break for the World Cup. I don't care what leagues say. There's not going to be a big break between league ending, World Cup, comeback play. And I think that's going to show in the quality of the Qatari World Cup. And I think you're going to see something very similar to the Africa Cup of Nations in Qatar, which is not, I mean, it is what it is, and you can say whatever you will about Qatar. But going back to the AFCON, I don't actually see Egypt or Senegal getting bumped. Unless they're playing each other or Cameroon, I can't really see their squads going home. Because there are 3 squads that are currently left in this tournament that you would say, it goes back to a little bit of what you were saying with the American national team, where there are 3 squads currently left in this tournament where you say, I recognize quite a few of these players from European leagues. And while that is biased, there's a reason the European leagues are the best, because they steal all the best players. And that's kind of why I don't really see the Cote d'Ivoire bumping Egypt tomorrow. I could be wrong, but the best team currently in the tournament for me, at least on paper and statistically, is still Senegal, and Senegal's still in it, and Senegal has the opportunity to go forward and basically cruise to the final and bring Sadio Mane a nice international trophy home to really rub it in Mo's face again. Because
the only thing I
Senegal,
would
we have to remember, has been to the final of the AFCON in the last 4 years.
yeah,
They were in the
been
last final.
Yeah.
they were in the last final, and we said it when we did our preview that it was a bit of an upset them losing to Algeria in the first place, given how well they were playing at the time. It was a bit of a surprise in 2019 when Senegal did in fact lose that final. My hope is that they get the chance. Saying that Senegal has the opportunity to cruise into the final, like they've had the opportunity to kind of cruise throughout the tournament. They cruised like a DeLorean stuck in second gear.
To give you an analogy,
but it's backfiring and it's just not going anywhere quickly.
To give you an analogy from the last international tournament that was a pretty big thing, they're France right now. Because France cruised in second gear until they got knocked out. And I genuinely believe that Senegal isn't going to get knocked out. I genuinely believe you'll see them in the final.
I want to piggyback on that. I actually agree with you with Senegal. How many times have we seen very good German teams sleepwalk through the group stage and even the early knockouts, and then all of a sudden semifinal, it's like, oh wow, they're really the best team in this tournament, aren't they? I can easily see that happening. Going back to the Egypt thing, it's less necessarily the talent there than who's cooking the dinner. Carlos Queiroz doesn't know what the heck he's doing. And that is why I can see them going home potentially early, because I'll be honest, I think Ivory Coast, from what I've seen, they're not the more talented team, but they have a recognizable system. I don't know what Egypt's really doing. They have the players, and they probably should be a more attacking team, and Queiroz has them lined up pragmatic. And I don't know. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
I don't think Carlos Queiroz has been particularly successful anywhere that he's gone to manage.
Iran, because they have like 17 center backs. So that's
yeah. So anytime that he can set, that's his perfect lineup, is a 9-1.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out with 9 center backs. I'm going to put them like a brick wall in front of the 18-yard box, and then we're just going to hoof it forward real quick. That's that.
When you have Mo Salah on the pitch, that's all you really need to do.
Yeah, he hasn't figured out how to do that yet.
And he's been playing him out of position. He can do the job as a number 9, but him at that right wing spot makes him special.
Speaking to one of my best mates who's Egyptian, she said they need to bring back Hassan Shahata and really go back to their roots of Egyptian football.
Well, I mean, they are the most successful team in this tournament. They've won it with a lot of players. I think that one of the things, Egypt has a very flourishing league. They've had some success there. It's the same with the Saudi league. It's found some success en route. While it may not be as successful as one of the European leagues, I feel like Egypt's had the most crises when they've gone for non-Egyptian, non-Arab managers, like a Bob Bradley, who did have some success there, but ultimately his job was to get them into the World Cup. He ended up. Carlos Queiroz, same thing.
Cooper.
Yeah, there's a list of people who have taken over the Egyptian job, because let's be honest, it's not a bad job to take. You've got resources, you've got players, you have the ability, but just once they go Western, they tend to lose their identity, which is what makes them so successful in the African Cup of Nations, is when they go and they play Egyptian football, which tends to be a little bit more on the attacking side, but a little bit more pragmatic than you might see at other areas. Will, to comment on what you said about, and Matt has brought this up and Stead has brought this up, and I keep hoping that you guys are all lying to me about how the African Cup of Nations could be a preview for the World Cup next year. It's like when you go to the Blockbuster and they show you the previews for this upcoming summer movie that you've been dying to see, and it just looks like it's going to be very, 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 very bad. And man, I've been waiting for 4 years to see this, and I get my first glimpse at it, and it just looks like it sucks. Kind of like when what was it? That movie Alexander with Colin, whatever his name is. The absolutely horrendous interpretation of, that was so bad. And I've been waiting so long to see it because as a classics major, any movie detailing the life of Alexander should be good. And it just looked like it was, I could tell from the word go, it was going to be awful. And yes, so I was really hoping that this is not a preview of what the World Cup is going to look like, because World Cup time is one of my favorite times every 4 years. It's an excuse to put on a different jersey, see who's going to talk to me, make new friends. Half of us are on this show because we either met during the World Cup or watched a World Cup match together. And to be robbed of that, it's just making me sad.
Well, maybe I'm lying. I'm not especially good at predicting the future. You've seen that before, so yeah, I could be wrong.
Well, you're also British, and by nature you're pessimistic. So, but it's less you; it's more Professor Matt instead giving it backing up your prediction, which is troubling. But, gentlemen, let's move along and talk a little bit about the team in second place, and let's address the giant red elephant in the room, Jurgen Klopp hopping off the bus to give fans beers. You haven't seen
I mean, he had to justify his corona diagnosis. He gave out corona.
Probably one of the greatest videos, and again, why we all love Klopp, because only Jurgen Klopp would jump off of the team bus to hand a couple of fans some beers. Now, the big question was, Diogo Jota goes into the Crystal Palace box. The goalkeeper comes out. We're not quite sure. Minimal contact, if any. Jota goes over. It's a penalty. A 2-1 game that was competitive, nervy. Crystal Palace were holding their own and looking very much like a team that could find a way back in this. Goes 3-1. Liverpool win. They solidify their credentials as the closest challenger to Manchester City. So, Will, you normally have very, very strong opinions on these, and they normally go one way and one way only. Penalty or not?
Oh, absolutely never. That was never a penalty. I mean, okay. When I judge, I am always honest with this. I'm always honest with the penalty decision. I do have a Liverpool bias.
Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you.
It was never a penalty.
You said it wasn't a penalty. I'm not quite sure what to do with that.
Because it's the kind of penalty that Manchester United wins.
Oh, now we're back to normal surface. Okay, that's a normal Will. That's better.
It's the kind of penalty that Manchester United or Manchester City gets, and it pisses you the hell off because it's in the 87th minute, and it essentially kills the game, and then you lose a really interesting final 7 minutes of football. And I'll admit that, yeah, it wasn't a penalty. Jota dived. Well, Jota didn't dive, but Jota ran into Guaita.
Allowed himself to get hugged.
I mean, essentially, by the time he'd run into Guaita, the ball was almost out of play, and he wouldn't have gotten there even if his name was Usain Bolt. So for me, the ref got it right on the field and then waited for 7 hours for them to do a VAR check. And after a 7-hour VAR check where they slowed it down and then sped it up and then slowed it down and then sped it up, they somehow managed to figure out some version of reality where it was a penalty. And I guess I can understand the version of reality they're looking at, but it was never, ever going to be a penalty. It shouldn't have been a penalty. And the fact that it was a penalty was kind of a travesty because, as you said, it was a nervy, interesting game of football. I don't think it would have changed the result of the game. I really don't think it would have. I don't think that Crystal Palace was going to come and score another one because the reason they scored one was Liverpool was, frankly, lazy and couldn't be bothered to cover their lines and cover through for an easy through ball. And they were trying to play an offside trap poorly. But, you know, it's a shame because it will be talked. I mean, if this is a turning point in the season, it will be talked about continuously. And it's one of those points where you're just like, piss off. It's
all right, Matt, before we get back to a point that I want to talk about with respect to VAR that Will hinted at, penalty or no?
I agree as well. It wasn't a penalty. Jota didn't dive, but like I said, he allowed himself to get contacted. The ball, in no universe that I'm aware of does he catch up to that. The one thing I will say, the alternative universe that I think VAR was operating under, if this was last season, I'm fairly certain that isn't called a penalty because last season there was the whole we have to protect the goalkeeper, and then shit happened. And what I mean by that is Jordan Pickford happened. They are if goalkeepers come out even semi-aggressively, I think that's going to get called more often than not now. I think we're seeing the little bit of a change in the way they're going to call that.
Now, one of the things that has bothered me is the trend that I see almost on a regular basis, which is when a referee is called over to look at VAR almost uniformly, they then they change the decision. Even if in this case, we can all agree that, you know, there wasn't much there. He probably wouldn't have been a foul outside of the box. He wasn't going to make contact. It doesn't necessarily, his decision on the field was right. You know, we are all teachers. We tell kids all the time, go with your first instinct. Why is such a thing in English football, Stead and Will and Matt, that every time a referee goes over and looks at a replay, they inevitably reverse whatever decision it was? I can remember the first experience that I had with VAR was in I believe it was in a Cameroon game in the Confederations Cup, I guess, back in
Russia.
Yeah, back in 17 Russia. And VAR, there was a foul. The VAR called the referee to look over it because he gave a yellow card. They're like, hey, you want to have another look at that and see if you want to give a red card? He went over, he looked at it, walked back out and said, no, I only want to give a yellow card. I was right the first time, stop bothering me. And there was a lot of argument for him to give a red card. But at that point in time, I was hopeful because I was like, hey, that's how the system's supposed to work. Hey, you want to have a look at that just so that we have all of our bases covered, take a look at it. Nah, I pretty much agreed that I got it right the first time. Go back out there. But in this case, again, you said, well, and man, he didn't, the referee did not make the call on the field that it was a penalty. VAR calls down, you know, maybe because of the sliding, the contact, whatever it was a contentious play. Here, let's just be safe, have another look at it. Inevitably, the minute that watch rings, it's just like the kid getting called to the principal's office. If I don't change this decision, I feel like I'm going to be in more trouble than if I do. Do you ever get that feeling, Will?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's essentially essentially the way I see it is the reason that whenever they're called over to the screen. You said we're all teachers. Essentially, it's open note test versus closed note test. The ref on the field has a tough job. Everyone agrees with that. But he's, first of all, in the Jota's decision, he was wasn't quite there, but I guess he could see it, and he decided it wasn't a penalty. Fair enough. But then they go for a 4-minute, however long it was, 3-minute VAR check, where he's shitting himself on the field, thinking, "Oh well, did I make a massive mistake? Oh, am I going to be lambasted for missing this?" Then he's already in his head. And so he's just like a student who is taking a test and he's not entirely certain of the answer he's given. And then the guy who is allowed to take notes walks up there and he sees on that guy's paper, he sees on the paper an answer that's different from his answer. And he thinks, oh, yeah, got to change mine. Because, I mean, he had all of the notes. And in the case of VAR, he had all of the angles. He had every opportunity. He's not in the stadium. He's not anywhere close to play. He's not going to be told off because, we get pissed off at VAR refs, but, realistically, we're not as pissed off as the on-field ref. And so...
I think, but even more so than this is...
psychologically...
I'm beginning to question, though, whether or not there's something in the referee's guidance where that they can be disciplined, because referees in any sport, England soccer, rugby, American football, they get graded on their performance. The better your grade on a week in, week out basis, the better the games that you get, the more likely that you're going to get a cup final, the more likely that you're going to get an international tournament, the more likely that you're going to be called over to Europe. And so is there somehow where they have learned or have this perception that if they stick by the call, even though they've been called over to review it on VAR, somehow they're going to face almost like a demerit or something like that, where it's going to, like, the outcome of standing by your call, even if the call is right, when you were called over to review it, is somehow worse than if you go over and say, I'm going to change it. I can see where I made this call. I might have been right, but I'm going to go ahead and just change this decision because it's safer for me and my career and everything to just change this decision as opposed to stick to my guns.
It sounds like that's what it is. Matt, go ahead and jump in. I don't really have much different to say than what Will just said.
You made a lot of good points there. I also wonder, the implementation of VAR was so bad in England initially that I wonder if, like, we've almost had the reverse now, where whatever the video assistant referee says is the default because we don't want to look stupid or silly. So I'm wondering if that's part of it too.
Well, we went from everything the video referee said was right, so that, to everything the video referee said was wrong, to now it's back to being right.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand, and we've had VAR for 3 years now, and for 3 years it's perpetually been screwed up, and we can perpetually been doing this because somehow after 3 years of having the same system to do the same exact things, they still don't know how to actually properly use it effectively. Like, what is it in their inability to give them clear-cut guidance? It is not like the NFL and the catch rule, right? This doesn't have to be something where it's like, it shouldn't be this complicated. I promise you.
There's an EPL thing too, because we've seen this technology be used and be used properly in other leagues.
Yeah, I know Rob and the Bundesliga will complain about certain VAR calls, but I've seen it be used more effectively over there. It really is like a unique to EPL thing.
Essentially, it's the quality of the referee officiating in the EPL. And I know that's an easy cop-out answer, but there's a reason that English refs are generally not used in international tournaments. As you say, they're graded week in, week out, and they have shit grades. I mean,
And
it's that simple.
and yeah, for that you have a point. All right, we are going to welcome in another one of our good friends, Chelsea Mike.
How's it going?
Interesting weekend for y'all, or interesting week for Chelsea.
Yeah.
Sometimes the good, sometimes the bad. But look, they got back to winning ways. I didn't see a need to torture Los and have him come on to comment on that performance. But give us the latest from Stamford Bridge.
Well, no, I mean, you should have. There were certainly a positive or two that he could have taken from that, I'm sure. But it was not great for Tottenham in that game. Chelsea, you know what? Chelsea earlier in the week they played Brighton. They played to a draw. No surprise, Brighton have the most draws in English football ever, it seems like. But I did say, you know, I did say to our good friend Larry, who, you know, his team went down to the South Coast and dropped points, that when you go down to the South Coast and you drop points, I mean, in the second half of the season, it's almost a title contenders, you know, it's they're testing with fire, right? So yeah, Chelsea played a somewhat uninspiring draw with Brighton in midweek, where they honestly looked very much not the better side. Against Tottenham, however, they did. And you know, Chelsea had a lot of things working for them. You know, when Harry Kane scored his goal in the first half, I already had written what I was going to say, because I've been complaining about this Chelsea team the whole time. Chelsea had a lot of, I mean, Chelsea had the ball in the Tottenham third for the first 10 minutes of the game, like consecutively. And out of that came two pretty good chances in the first minute to Lukaku. But there was a lot more quick passing and a lot more looks to get Lukaku involved. Lukaku had two balls in the first half that were just to him in space in the middle of the goal, and he failed to turn them both netward, unfortunately. But anyway, that's a positive sign, because if they could get him involved in the way that he likes to be involved, and it's also not bankrupting Tuchel's game plan, that's a positive. But so first half, Chelsea had everything against the run of play. It seemed as though Harry Kane would score. However, the referee called it off for a push in the back. I'm gonna be devil's advocate, since we don't have Los here. And how does a like 230-pound mountain of a man go over with the slightest touch? However, as a Chelsea fan, I don't care. He did touch him. It did go to VAR, and they couldn't overturn it. So first goal disallowed. Chelsea start out the second half against Tottenham, and just again, they were dominant for they scored the two goals in the match in the first 10 minutes of the second half. And Chelsea, like I said, like I've been saying all season, Chelsea have been dominating early parts of matches and early parts of halves and haven't been converted. They didn't convert in the first half, however they did in the second. I mean, Hakeem Ziyech put in a goal that, you know, I mean, what are you going to do there? That Hakeem Ziyech is one of the more frustrating players on Chelsea, because when Hakeem Ziyech is on, he can score a goal like he did this weekend, and it was fantastic. It was one of the better goals you're going to see all season. And then straight after that, about 5 minutes later, he got the ball back and you know, really peppered the keeper's gloves from virtually the same spot he scored. Chelsea scored on a header, sort of controlled the game. Then after that point, Kepa makes a pretty good save on Harry Kane at the end. and that was the game. I've got to say, some of the things that I'm noticing about Chelsea right now, Mendy has been away for the African Cup of Nations for a little while, and Kepa, while he does sometimes, I mean, what did he catch Man City offsides with his own version of the offside trap there? I mean, there's sometimes where Kepa's doing weird things, but in general, over the course of the last couple of weeks, Kepa has been a pretty above average backup goalkeeper. And besides that, Hudson-Odoi really set up that Ziyech goal. And that brings up, questions about Chelsea's midfield future. Hudson-Odoi looks like a guy who should have a spot all the time. But there's so many players that how does he get that, especially when they get Reece James back, especially when they get Ben Chilwell. Chelsea also played 4 at the back this week. It have been the last couple days or last couple games, with the absence of Chilwell and Reece James, but the defense has been adequate, and finally they figured out this week, or against Tottenham, not against Brighton, but against Tottenham, where the offense comes from when the wingbacks aren't really your most lethal offensive threats. They sort of have been for Chelsea this season. So anyway, good win, good home win, good derby win, pretty bad draw against Brighton, although our record of not having lost to Brighton since 1938 remains intact. So yes, up and down, but mostly positive. You take 4 points.
It was a good week.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk. Sted and I touched on this, and I want to make sure that we get this in before we move on to the lower league report, because if things continue to go the way that they are, they might be playing in the lower league report, in the lower leagues for the first time in well over 60 years. Mike, Matt, and Will and Sted, what in the world and all that is holy is going on the blue half of Liverpool? I know the two of you, Matt and Will, have got to be loving it. Moshiri's project is just imploding. They got rid of they're languishing in 16th. They're only a couple of points, about 6 points above the relegation zone.
I think they have 2 or 3 games in hand, though.
They do. That's what I was about to point out. Like, they're only about 6 points above the relegation zone, but they do have 2 games in hand over a team like Burnley, who are sitting at rock bottom of the table, 7 points off. They had to fire Rafa Benitez, who was never a popular hire. There was those comments the other week where Moshiri said, somebody was saying when we need to figure out what to do with our club, we always ask, what would Everton do? Because they tend to get it right, and so much has gone wrong. Bill Kenwright has, I guess you could say that he has presided predominantly in the last 20 years over a downturn in Everton's fortune. There was, Moyes got them up into the European qualification places, but since then he left to go to Man United. It's been a steady decline. The managerial issues have been bad. The over 500 million spent and not much to show for it. So instead, I'll give you the first crack at this. What in the devil is going on, and is there any way to fix it?
I think it's a managerial situation, actually. They've spent the money, they brought in talent. I mean, granted, we could always say, like, look, Moise Keane wasn't a good idea or something like that. But I mean, every team makes those kinds of mistakes. And if you look at the product on the field, the players that have come in have actually played, not that bad. Iwobi did all right there. He looked good. And So I mean, I just threw him out. That was the easiest one I could pick. But
Dominic
and you gotta wonder.
Calvert-Lewin has
Yeah.
developed well. He's been
Well,
good.
You also have to wonder, is this kind of like shrouded, mysterious, cloudy thing that's going on with Gylfi Sigurdsson, is that doing anything to the club? Because like there's no, we can't say anything because it's because of the very, very delicate situation. So, and I don't want to, but I mean, people are putting two and two together. It can't be anything positive. So I think it comes down to really they need a very, very effective manager who can take the reins and get things tied up a little bit tighter. That's really what it appears to be to me, because I mean, I don't see a gaping hole in the team that would have them be positioned the way they're positioned. I'll put it that way. Yeah, they've had some really bad results recently, but I can't say that I'm looking at a team that's going, well, they have to get rid of this guy and this guy and this guy. I'm not seeing that with this Everton squad. So I think this is kind of one of the situations that, well, I like how you put in the chat, how Watford had burned through their third manager this season already. Because we talked about that earlier, how, and Mike even said, well, they can't fire the players and they don't know what else to do. So you fire the manager. I think this is one situation though with Everton where it's like, no, I think the lack of a good, firm, solid manager is really what the problem is. And then not until they get one will can they turn the situation around.
So it turns out that Rafa Benitez was not the right person. I know that he was never exactly well loved because of his experience managing Liverpool. I personally thought that he might be able to get a little bit more out of them than he was able to. So again, they burned through another manager. Now we're on Duncan Ferguson. There was reports that they tried to go back for Roberto Martinez, who Moshiri had to get rid of initially because the fans had turned against him, and rightly so, because when he made the move from Swansea and Southampton to Everton, the results just didn't add up and they weren't any good. He's since gone on and done good things with the Belgian national team. National team managing versus club managing, very different. We hear Wayne Rooney's name getting mentioned, Frank Lampard, who I also don't think would be necessarily the right guy, although I have a little bit more faith in Frank's ability to guide Everton out of this than Wayne Rooney's. Will, stop me when this gets to be a joke and I'm making something up.
The next manager is going to be linked to Everton is Steven Gerrard. I mean, it's hilarious at this point, isn't it? And
I mean, it really does get to the point where you can't make this stuff up. It's been so bad and so dysfunctional. You've got the Evertonians, who are not known as like the most boisterous of fan bases, renting planes and hanging signs to fire the board and anti-Bill Kenwright. Like when I think of Everton fans, they're not exactly like, they don't strike me as the most boisterous of fan bases, but it's like, what did you have to do to even piss them off?
I mean, I think that essentially what Everton actually needs, what they really need, is a good person who can tell a manager, no, you can't buy him. You can't buy that. You just want, that's a shiny toy you just want.
But who's buying the players? Is it Moshiri or is it the manager?
That's the big question, because they burn through managers, they burn through players. They buy a player for 70 million one season and sell him for 20 million the next season, losing 50 million pounds on him plus his wages. I mean, it's baffling to me, because what Stead says, they need a good manager, and anyone who knows Rafa Benitez, it's a fact. Agent Rafa did his job for Everton because Agent Rafa is not a lovable manager. He is an awful, he's not a good person to be managed. I don't know if you read Steven Gerrard's biography, but
no. Basically,
Gerrard said, Rafa was a great manager for Liverpool because Rafa hated everyone. No one was good enough for Rafa. Everyone was droppable. And at Everton, where you have such a number of stars, and a number of players that are so up in their heads about how good they are, then they're not going to listen to a manager like that. So, I mean, you know, I think that Rafa is a brilliant manager still. He obviously knows his stuff. He obviously knows how to manage a football team, but he is also a manager from 2005. He was last good in about 2007. I mean, he's not been bad since then, but he was last relevant in about 2007, 2008. And that's about when he went to Chelsea. And that's about when his downturn happened.
Yeah, Byron Robb says, you know, the game is passing by. We know a lot of managers from the aughts and early teens, Rafa Benitez, Jose Mourinho come to mind most obviously. One can make the argument about Carlo Ancelotti, although
isn't it a fever dream of mine that Ancelotti was at one point Everton's manager this season?
Yes. No,
and
he
so
was.
They've gone through two of the best managers from the 2000s this season.
Yes,
and they're in 19th.
And they're for their next trick, just because he was fired recently, they're going to hire Claudio Ranieri to come in, because
I think that would actually help them, honestly.
I don't know. I mean, he is the Tinkerman. He will drop everybody, but I guess that's what's left. Mike and Matt, somebody's got to be kidding me with this Wayne Rooney rumor. Like, on an emotional level, I get it. You know, he's the Everton kid. He broke through with them. He that's his boyhood club. Although, like, let's be honest, the bulk of his tenure was at Manchester United. That's the club that he's most associated with and closest to. But he hit the last Premier League team that he played for was Everton before he went to, you know, so he's got those strong Merseyside Everton connections. But seriously, does anybody think that he's done beyond the emotions of it, the galvanizing a team, you know, tactically, anything? Does anybody, do either of you actually think that he's up to the job of taking over an Everton squad that has legit designs on being in a European place and guiding them out of a relegation battle? So, Mike, give me something on this.
Well, honestly, you know, I think right now the goal of the next Everton manager is to survive, and I think that you know, Wayne Rooney's been doing that with Derby County. You know, he has taken a difficult situation and done really well with it. It's increasing his star. Is he ready to do this? I don't know. Last year he took over a Derby County team that was struggling, and he did not help out. However, this season, and they barely survived, and like their barely survival could be the death of them. But at the same time, he has galvanized a team that's in a difficult situation. He has taken underperforming people and made them overperformers. And he has, you know, gone through, you know, whatever pressure he's going to face at Everton, he's already been facing on a constant basis, because his team right now is faced with the threat of not existing anymore in just a week. So, I mean, I think he can handle the pressure. He's been a Premier League player. I think that if the goal of Everton is just to survive this year, he'd be adequate for that. And I think he might inspire, you know, some new things in people. But my question is, you know, he's taking a bunch of boys and making them men based on all the restrictions he's got at Derby County. But like, can you do that with full-on established professionals? The players he's dealing with right now don't have egos. So, you know, what's Wayne Rooney's ego management ability? That's an enormous question, especially in a team that has the level of talent that they do, which let's face it, is not probably top 6 talent, but it's certainly top half, at least top 12 talent. What would he do with the bruised egos of a side like that? That's where I question whether or not Wayne Rooney would be a good hire. For me, other guys like Frank Lampard would only be a good hire if they went down, and they had to jettison all those guys, because we know that Frank Lampard struggled with guys with big contracts, guys with big egos. So I don't know. I wouldn't write off Wayne Rooney. I think the emotional attachment of that is something. And I think, if we get towards the end of the month here and they still haven't hired anyone on a permanent basis, it leads kind of towards that going there, because there is the possibility that Darby just won't be there and he'll be a manager looking for a job.
Matt, do you think that Wayne Rooney, if he got the job, could walk into Everton's locker room and get the respect? I mean, it's, yes, his accolades as a player are there. He's the leading all-time scorer for England and Manchester United. But, there have been any number of off the field and on the field-related incidents. We know his feelings about training from his time in England all the way up to and including his tendency to enjoy hanging out in Bethesda on days before matches at bars. This is all well-known things. So do you think that manager Wayne Rooney can put all of that to down enough, can walk into a locker room at Everton, and where these guys are used to dealing with the likes of Rafa Benitez and Carlo Ancelotti, and get their respect enough for them to buy into whatever he's going to say?
That's really tough to say. And Mike hit on a lot of it, because he has been doing a fantastic job with Derby County. And if you need a sort of Band-Aid man, he's probably not the worst one, particularly because of the emotional attachment to the club. And maybe, to be fair, maybe they need a change from the Ancelottis and the Rafas of the world. Like, maybe this set of players there just does not respond to old school disciplinarians. Is he a good long-term hire? I honestly don't know. I've looked at the list of candidates, and there's no one there that strikes me as one. I mean, Lampard and Rooney are probably the only two. I've heard Mourinho's name thrown out there. That's a bad idea. Roberto Martinez, that's just a step backwards. Not just sort of in terms of building a culture for the club, because I think that's Everton's real problem. If you look at the two Liverpool sides, the two Merseyside sides.
Also, can I say, just if you're an Everton fan and you thought that Roberto Martinez was going to lead the golden generation of Belgian football right before the World Cup, what's wrong with you?
Well,
he was never coming back. Never, ever.
Mike threw out, he did decent, like pretty good things with Belgium. I'm going to remind you what this man said before the Euros. He was asked about tactics, and he essentially said, well, if you have the best team in the world, tactics aren't important. Yes, that's why Belgium, this golden generation, hasn't won anything, and why he didn't last very long at Everton. Like, that would be a disaster.
I was just pointing out the fact, I think he's done better things at Belgium when he took over than we expected him to. It's still a massively underperforming side for when you have the quality that they have had for as long as they have had it. And it's hard to even say that it's just one golden generation. Belgium's gone through pretty much a generation and a half of having
They've
them.
gone through a golden age.
Yeah. And they're still so fortunate to move on, from the likes of Christian Benteke, who started all of this, to Romelu Lukaku, who's still not old, Kevin De Bruyne. You have, Eden Hazard's on the back nine of his career, but he's still an effective. He can still be an effective player.
Younger brother is coming up.
There's younger Hazard. Jeremy
Yeah, it's
Doku.
Thibaut Courtois is still their goalie too.
Yeah.
So like this is a side that has been internationally relevant for the better part of let's call it 15 years now. Whereas when we look at a golden generation, I'm looking at like Iceland. They got 2 tournaments out of that. Costa Rica got like 2.5 tournaments out of that. Chile got 2 World Cups and 2 Gold Cups. But look at where they are now.
England.
Yeah.
England,
they've had a golden generation every year. Apparently,
they've had a golden generation. Every other generation is a golden generation, and then the ones that win are the ones that aren't. But
I'm pretty sure the English, and no offense, but I'm pretty sure the English golden generation are becoming great grandparents now.
Yes. Well, look, the England golden generation. Actually, like, unfortunately, that's what I was about to say. I think there's only like 2 of them left. I'm pretty sure most of the English golden generation died. And I don't mean that to be sarcastic, but poor Bobby Charlton's about to turn 100.
But sort of circling back around, I mean, I don't know. No, none of us really know about Rooney, but like,
I think that of the candidates, Rooney is probably one of the better ones.
Yeah,
I don't think that he has to worry about respect.
It was like
that is one of the things that scares me the most about the fact that is if I was an Everton fan and I look at the work that Wayne Rooney has actually done, again, from an emotional standpoint, I get it, right? I get it. It reminds me a little bit more about when Roy Keane took over Sunderland and yelled real loud and drove them all the way up to the top of the table, got to the Premier League and lasted 3 weeks before he was gone. And they've tried that one twice. I'm just not sure that tactically or anything like that, what he's doing right now is more of a man management emotional thing. And maybe I'm not putting enough stock in the needs of Premier League players to be managed emotionally, thinking that, you have to have some sort of tactical nous. But I just got done. My team just fired a manager that had absolutely no clue what they were doing tactically. And we saw where that got us. Matt, I'm going to give you the last word on this because we got to hit the road.
If vibes are what we're looking for, just enough vibes to get through this season, I think he's a better choice than some of the other names. I think the issue with Everton, and we've all sort of been dancing around it, is organizational and institutional. I don't think it's necessarily the players. I don't necessarily think it's the management. It's coming from above. They haven't had a project in the better part of a decade and a half. They buy things and cycle through managers. And they do have a lot of talent. I think Armstead's right, but they have a lot of talent that's very strange. There's like 5 rebuilds there.
But that's what you
James Rodriguez.
That's what you have when you have a team that's put together by 7 different managers and 6 different football operators. They don't have a project. And the thing is, as we're talking about, Wayne Rooney would be great to get you through this season. I think that they need to actually look with a coherency as to, what are we going to do? If you're going to name a caretaker manager and go to Man United route, then go for it. Bring back Big Sam Allardyce. Let him keep you up, knowing that the only thing that's going to happen is that he's going to be there for a little bit. He's going to keep you out of the relegation zone long enough for you to stabilize the ship next year. If your intent, though, is to actually make some sort of improvement to begin a project, because remember, there's a new stadium going up. They're going to be leaving Goodison Park, and everybody would, you'd like to go into your new stadium with people feeling good about it, especially since you have all those seats that you need to sell so that you can get the ticket revenue in so that you can afford to make more stupid purchases. I just think that they need to have some sort of idea about that. Gentlemen, God, it really went fast. Mike, I apologize. We did not actually get to the lower league report, but we will get there next week. You know why? Because we don't have any. All we have is international, so
we can start that at 9:30.
Well, it's Derby deadline day next week too, so there'll be a lot more free flowing news going on. We'll see. Derby positive news for them this week. We'll see. Deals still have to be inked here.
Well, there
Ink
was
still has to get
another
on
there,
paper.
there was another bidder who came in, but there's still these issues with the lawsuits and the failure to name a preferred bidder that's holding it up. And so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, the Derby stuff will be something that will really be at the top of our minds in that next week. All right, guys, it has been a good one. Thank you, Rob, for coming on, talking a little bit of Bundesliga and some U.S. men's national team. The gruesome twosome, as they shall now be known, British Will and the Professor Matt Kowalski, our resident Scousers, coming on, talking a little bit of Liverpool and a little bit of African Cup of Nations, and then turning their attention to the other side of Merseyside and talking a little bit of the Blue Half and Everton. And of course, Chelsea Mike giving us the Chelsea update and jumping in at the end. And of course, Stead. Thank you so much for keeping keeping trains on time. And how can I forget the best performance in all of podcast history by a giant microbe? Yes, once again, ladies and gentlemen, it is Covey the COVID, whose misadventures have been taking social media by storm. Pay attention to the latest updates from Covey the COVID and his mini-me, Roni. Yeah, Covey has a mini-me. So for the cast of the Too Many Guys Soccer Show, Byron Rob, British Will, Professor Matt Kowalski, Chelsea Mike, and Stead, and of course Covey. Yes, I will acknowledge it. I'd like to thank you all. I'm Mike. We did all right this week, and we'll try and do better next week.